This ended up being way longer of a discussion than I thought it would, but that's what happens with Adventure Time. And somehow, Adventure Time still isn't over. We'll be getting the Fiona and Cake spin-off series very soon. And by very soon, I mean probably in like 2 years. But if you want to hear more about that, as any sort of news comes out about it, and of course as the actual episodes come out, please subscribe and stay tuned to my channel. My friends and I are also working on group reviews of all these Distant Lands episodes. We have Obsidian and BMO done, and we have one for Together Again in Wizard City coming soon as well. So if you want basically just a ton of Adventure Time news and reviews, stay tuned to the channel, and like this video as well. That helps my channel show up for other people. Because I'm a big Adventure Time fan, so I feel like I have things to say about the show that other people wouldn't. So hopefully you enjoy what I make. Alright, so the grand finale of Adventure Time Distant Lands, Wizard City, has released. Let's talk about it. I've only watched this episode twice, but hopefully that's enough for me to have a good feel for it. And this is one that definitely benefits from being watched twice, I would say, because on my first watch, a lot of it left me a bit confused, but that could be partly because I set my expectations in a weird way. You know, because going into Adventure Time, you never know what to expect, but from what we got from the other Distant Lands episodes, I was expecting this episode to touch upon lore of the Adventure Time universe a little more. You know, because BMO, surprisingly, like I didn't expect BMO to do it, but it's kind of what set the expectation, is that BMO explained a little bit about what happened to humans in Mushroom Lore. Obsidian gave us a lot of Marceline backstory with her mom, which I didn't even really expect, like most of that episode to focus on Marceline's mom as a flashback thing, rather than just Marceline and PB. And then Together Again gave us theoretically like the future of Ooh, and then also just a lot about the Dead World, which was a concept the show had, but was never fully explored. So this episode, I was like, this is our chance for some magic backstory. You know, we'll hear about Evergreen and maybe more about the elements and things like that. But we kind of sort of don't. They talk about this other aspect of the lore that I didn't realize was even like an aspect, but I guess that's something to talk about a little later. But that's just definitely like when I first watched this episode, I went in expecting something that it didn't really have, which is what happens all the time with Adventure Time basically. But it's like once you get over the fact that it isn't what you thought it would be, you're like, oh crap, wait, it's still like it's really still a really good, compelling, fun story. So I kind of have a ton of notes like related to that aspect of my thoughts on it. So other than that, I'm gonna just kind of have to improv some of my thoughts here. So this episode focuses primarily on Peppermint Butler, which honestly is like fantastic because he never had an episode of his own, basically, right? Like he had the Nemesis episode, which is one that I definitely don't really even remember, and that was kind of it. That was like our only glimpse into Pep as the forefront of his own episode story. So I was very interested by the fact that this one was all about him, but it's also about like, you know, this new kid version of him, which is an aspect that I did have to be reminded of, because I was like, you know, I remember there was the Dum Dum juice in the season finale, the series finale, of course. So I was like, okay, I guess Pep got touched by that at some point, but I didn't remember like how or why. But I guess like him getting doused with it is like what made PB want to start the war, right? I didn't even rewatch the episode where it happened, so I don't know. But that's what they imply in this episode anyways. Plus there's a quick little flashback to it in this episode, so you don't get totally lost, although I guess, you know, if you were watching the final season of the show, you might not fully understand what's going on here. But Pep goes to wizard school, meets Abraca Debra, who is Abraca Daniel's niece, and she is a hilarious, very fun, optimistic little character. I've said this a lot in my other videos, but characters like her that are just painfully like oblivious to the fact that like they're annoying. I love characters like that. She's very peppy. She doesn't really peppy. Haha. I guess that goes along with pep. But you know, she's very peppy. She's very happy and optimistic. And the only thing that ever gets to her is like little Pep saying that he doesn't want to be her friend, which is it's very cute. She's a very fun character, and a little bit of a generic plot with her where she's interested in stage magic, which, you know, just like human fake trick magic rather than like the real magic that exists on Ooh. She's more interested in being like a performer than a wizard, and you know, and then everybody else wants her to not do that. She should be a wizard because that's what they have to be, and she doesn't want to be what they have to be. You know, typical story stuff. And really, Does that even necessarily get resolved by the end of the episode? I can't really quite recall that at the moment, but it doesn't matter too much. But that leads into Pep's plot, which is honestly kind of the thing I found most interesting here. It's that the original Pep still exists in this episode. His soul, I guess, just his soul is existing as a spirit haunting over the kid version of himself, because he intentionally cursed himself so that the past form of him would always be around no matter what happened to his body, which is a very weirdly specific thing for him to care about. But I guess when you live in a world like this with crazy magic, that's a concern a lot of characters might have that we don't know about. I really didn't expect him to make an appearance at all. With, like, I don't know why. Like, there could have been flashbacks with him and stuff, but hearing him again, hearing his voice and stuff again was really fun. And also just the way he was, like, framed so obviously to be the antagonist was really awesome. I was thinking at first that he might be behaving a little out of character. Like, I don't really remember him being this mean. Like, he's very, very mean to himself in this episode. But, you know, then I back away and I think about the aspect of, like, he's being mean to himself. I guess it's justifiable, in that way. And plus just his voice acting and the way they frame him and his ghostly appearance and stuff, it's all really, really cool. So I ended up not really actually minding whether or not I felt he was being himself or not. But I'm sure that's something a lot of people will know how to disagree on me, because they have better memories of how he was in the original series, but I don't quite fully remember. But he was so cool, and he adds an interesting moral to the episode where it's like, you don't even have to listen to yourself. You know, like, Abraca Debra had expectations put upon her by her family, and Pep had expectations put upon himself by by some past version of him. It could be seen weirdly as, like, his father or, like, still his family type of thing. But I think if you think about it more specifically, like, it was himself driving him to be a wizard, and he kind of had zero interest in it, or at least zero interest in becoming a great wizard and doing all the menacing dark magic and just becoming who he already was before again. Like, it was a very interesting plot for sure. This frame right here in particular is such a cool, like, look at those hands. Who drew those hands? Like, this, they did a really good job of making him very evil. Like, again, not what I would have expected or really thought of his character, but, like, just works so well for the plot they had going on here. Aside from that aspect of it, I guess the other really fantastic things about this episode are the fact that it's, like, really funny, because this is something I have notes about, so I'll talk a little more about it. They're very aware that this is kind of a pretty generic Harry Potter style magic school thing, so they just kind of go all in on making very tropey characters who are very self-aware, and it's really funny. There's some really funny gags. The way that one kid gets turned into a rock, and they just still, like, hang out with him even though he's just a rock the whole time, like, that was very funny. There's a lot of very funny expressions and stuff. You know, sometimes, because that's Adventure Time's strong point, is that it always has a variety of board artists who have their own styles, and it lets all their styles shine. But in this episode, I really felt like when some of the artists wanted to do really exaggerated, goofy stuff, it felt right at home. Nothing ever felt out of place. Like, mixing the more on-model stuff with the sort of pretty goofy, almost like SpongeBob-esque zaniness that went on at parts of this episode, it wasn't jarring at all, in the same way that it was in, like, Obsidian, because Obsidian was a much more dramatic episode. So when somebody suddenly had an anime expression in that episode, like, it was a little off. But this whole episode gives you this vibe that it's just mostly fun, like, aside from the moral going on, and I guess the very sudden dark turn at the end, which we could also talk about in a little bit. There's just a very nice atmosphere to this episode, and part of that too comes from the actual motion animation is, and the way that the coloring and background arts are. Like, this episode is beautiful, and, like, framing wise too, it feels the most cinematic Adventure Time has ever been, which is pretty interesting, because all of Distant Lands, I would say, every episode does pretty much feel like a movie. But this episode specifically, I think maybe because it was so standalone, because it was focused on a character. Young Pep is technically a new character, so this was an episode entirely about a new character, so that made it feel like we were walking into a movie of some sort here, rather than the other episodes that were like movie style arcs based on characters we already seen. But the fact that this is all new stuff, all new side characters and everything, like, really made it feel like it was totally original. Comedy wise and visual quality wise, this episode is fantastic, and I would even say visually it it's the peak of the show in a way, just because of how perfect they meshed the goofiness with the serious aspects and how cinematic it ends up feeling. With all that out of the way, we can talk about what I have notes about. So, like I was saying, the whole aesthetic of this episode rules, but a lot of it kind of, I wouldn't say falls flat, but it's just not that interesting. Aside from the cartoon stuff going on, like the very cartoony moments and the whole aspect of like Pep fighting himself, a lot of this episode is pretty generic. And that's just because of this setting. It's this unavoidable Harry Potter comparison, even though I'm sure Harry Potter probably wasn't the first thing with the magic school, but it like created the rules that every other piece of media follows for magic school based things. So it just makes all magic school stuff not seem that interesting. It's also a personal thing that unfortunately I find like sci-fi a lot more interesting than I find magic based things, but I'm definitely in the minority on that one, because so many people grew up with D&D and World of Warcraft and stuff, and are like, they drool over this magic stuff whenever they see it. But for me, it just doesn't interest me in the same way that like a sci-fi thing would. But again, that's just a personal thing, but that would probably help you understand why I have these sort of feelings towards the main story of the episode. I do really love Adventure Time's version of magic though, but it's more so like I love the sci-fi aspect of it, or like the weird historical aspect of it, where it's like this is a universe where magic always existed, but then like humans showed up, they made up technology, and the magic was unknown and obsolete for a while. Mushroom War happened, and then the world was recreated and magic became a thing again. It's just kind of the aesthetics of the magic too, because sometimes it's like very, very goofy. I love all of that. Like Adventure Time might have my favorite fictional magic universe, really, but still, just overall, I don't like magic in general that much. Again, this is a very Harry Potter-esque story. All the teachers are secretly evil. There's like class teams that are always competing. There's a popular guy that everybody wants to be, etc. It's all bland Harry Potter stuff, but it's also just kind of bland school stuff, which Adventure Time's never covered school like before, basically. So I was interested to see this sort of setting in this universe, but they unfortunately, aside from like the designs and stuff, they really don't do anything to make it not feel like every other school story that exists. You always go into Adventure Time wanting like an Adventure Time thing, like only Adventure Time could do this, but really nothing in this episode, aside from Pep's whole arc and fighting himself and stuff again, nothing else in this episode quite really feels like that. I guess that, it's not that much of a problem because it's still thoroughly entertaining, but I just personally expect a little bit more uniqueness from this show and from how the other Distant Land specials went. Like, it's clear that some viewers like me would have an expectation of this being a bit more deeper than this. Like, maybe this could have been like, there's continuity here with Chuskus and the moisturizer, which was a super, super funny, completely random thing for them to bring back. But I did love that. So I was going to say, like, this should technically, because, this could have been the first Distant Lands episode or something, and, like, the pacing would have been different, but I don't know. What happened here, I meant to talk about this at the start of the video, but then I didn't. They were originally ordered to just make 3 Distant Land specials, which would have been BMO, Obsidian, and Together Again. For whatever reason, HBO was very, very nice to us, and they said that they could actually make 4. So they made Wizard City. Pacing-wise, Together Again was definitely intended to be the grand finale of the series, but even though we're getting spin-offs, so maybe not. But it was meant to be the grand finale of this Distant Lands thing, but they just kind of released these episodes as they got finished. Like, it was very clear that these were all being actually worked on and drawn up and animated and stuff during the past 3 years. That's why there were such long delays, because they had to work remote and all that stuff, which is impressive in itself. These were all being worked on like simultaneously, so that they released as they were finished, and that's why we end off with this one. And just pacing wise, it feels a little weird to end off on this one because it's not really that grandiose, but that's just the way they did it. But if you have friends who end up wanting to check this out, I guess you could encourage people to watch it in the intended order, and maybe that would help the experience a little bit. Now we can move on to the ending of the episode, or I guess the other greater arc of the episode, that being the murder mystery that goes on. That honestly, like, this is the aspect of the episode that had my head spinning a bit, and it still kind of does. I when you rewatch it, you do pick up on many more things that help it make sense. Literally, there's a very brief moment where Dr. Caledonius says, she points out an old rock and she's like, oh, like dark wizards used to worship here. And that was like a really important piece of dialogue that I missed when I first watched the episode. And when I watched it a second time, I was like, oh, okay, so I guess I was supposed to catch on starting at this moment. But like, it's a very like brief, like 2-sentence thing. I didn't pick up on it on my first time. What goes on here is that the teachers are trying to resurrect an ancient monster of dark magic by using its old blood, or its old ichor, but they call it ichor, which is another thing that really confused me, because like I've never heard that term before, but I guess that's like a mythology term. So I was like, is this an Adventure Time word, or is this like something I'm supposed to understand? Like, is this blood? What, like, it's very embarrassing that I was confused about that, because I'm sure a ton of people watching this like just knew what that meant, but I didn't. So I was like, what is ichor? Is ichor the monster's name? Is it like that was an embarrassing thing to be confused about. The way that this mystery plays out and like what it means for the lore had me very confused, and it still kind of does. So let's talk about that for like 20 minutes. It got clear to me at a point that Dr. C was definitely the main villain. I even for a second, because she was a doctor, and she like does a weird thing where she spins her whole body that made her kind of seem like a robot. So I was even starting to think like, is this Dr. Gross? Like, that would be kind of cool if they bring her back for this. Like, that'd be interesting. And then it wasn't, which again is another setting up fake expectations for yourself for an Adventure Time episode that would never come true. So, you know, that's all on me basically. But I, for a brief moment, had that impression from her character. I found it weird that they kind of like, they have moments of like, I guess it's supposed to be Buffo at his desk putting the moisturizer on himself. I just like did a hand motion of putting moisturizer on my hand, but there's no camera. So from those moments, I was kind of inferring like there was just one villain. But then at the end, it's like, oh no, it's all the teachers and they're like a cult. And the character Buffo that they were setting up as the main villain was like actually just a rogue person from this cult, and he got himself killed because he like literally died. He just straight up actually died, I guess, because he drank the ichor and he wasn't the source of magic. Or does he have to, or do you have to drink it on this throne? Or again, this is an aspect that I didn't understand at all. And I just found it weird too that at a point in the episode it shows Buffo's hands and they're all bandaged up, so it's like very obvious that he's the villain at that moment to the viewer. But then like he's not, but he was the person that they were setting up to be the villain the whole time. But then he's dead. It was just a weirdly paced mystery, because they tried to subvert it, but I was like fully expecting it to not be subverted. But I was also fully expecting Dr. C to be the villain, but I wasn't expecting the other teachers to have been involved, because they're like brand new characters. You only see them for a few seconds and stuff. Well, so I guess some of them aren't brand new. They're from like past Wizard City episodes, which I don't have much memory of. So, you know. And then there's the aspect of like, I understand this a bit more now. The ghost Peppermint Butler being so ready to drink the ichor and like being so excited to be turned into a monster. Because, like, he knew that that's what was going to happen, right? Like, yeah, past Pep just wants all his dark magic back. He wants himself to be recreated. But now he has an opportunity to have himself recreated, but even stronger. But did Ghost Pep know about all this stuff before? Like, Dr. C has a tattoo of him. Why did she have a tattoo of him? Like, they were a cult that worshipped Pep. Like, why didn't they ever just go see him and like tell him that they're trying to get this ichor stuff and have him help and stuff? Because he's the one who's the master of the dark magic. He would have found this thing in like 5 seconds, right? I don't understand the separation there, where it's like established that past Pep is such a strong dark wizard, and then there's these people that want dark wizardry back, but they like they never hung out with him or anything, or like we get no kind of implication of that being the case. Like, why did they have a tattoo of him? I guess is my main question there. You know, because they knew that he was the one who had to drink the ichor. So it's like, why didn't they just have him drink it sooner? Yeah, okay, they couldn't find where the monster was. Something that happened in this episode that I don't quite remember is what led them to know that Kokonsepi, something like that. I'm just gonna say the monster so I don't feel dumb. That the bones were under the city. Like they just discovered that in this episode, so I can understand that. But did they not have past Pep helping them find this? I guess past Pep hated Wizard City for whatever reason, right? And then, yeah, that's another thing too. There's like a rumor early in the episode. First of all, I like that they mentioned gold briefly also early in the episode. But there's the rumor that like Pep destroyed Wizard City, but that never happened like at all in the show. So it's like, why did they establish that as a thing if it didn't happen? And then there's also nothing to imply that it had been destroyed. Maybe they were confusing events from some other episode. Maybe Betty, like Bella Noche doing evil stuff, and they're like, oh, Pep did that or something. But they should have made that clearer if the intention there was that. Also, I wanted Bella Noche to come back, but whatever, it's fine. That's one of the many big questions that the climax left me with is like, was past Pep aware of this cult of people that were waiting for him to drink this ichor when they found it? And also, how did they know about the ichor to begin with? How did they know that Pep had to drink it? I guess just because he had dark magic, but what was stopping them from also doing dark magic? Is dark magic a thing that's just tied to this monster's blood, or is it something that's tied to magic? Or, I don't know. This episode creates this sudden distinction, and then it tries to explain it. This distinction that dark magic and magic are different. And I never, a single time in the whole show, had that impression. Pep used dark magic all the time. Like he was like a shady dude. He was very awesome. But I never thought that the magic he had been using was a different entity from the magic that other people were using. But this episode tries to illustrate that it was, and like why a villain would want access to it. Going into this episode, I and any other viewer would definitely benefit from watching other wizard related episodes of the show and Peppermint Butler related episodes of the show, because maybe there's some obvious connection that I totally missed out on because I didn't rewatch a lot of stuff. Well, I didn't rewatch anything, honestly, before watching this. I did love, though, the lore aspect of like once they showed Kokonsepi, him, because he's yellow, I automatically assumed like, oh, it's like one of the ancient monsters that's very briefly mentioned in the Gold Star episodes. And then it actually is. You could actually see this in the background of that episode, which is I almost swore. It's very cool. I love that. So like magic coming from, or I guess just dark magic, right? Like just dark magic comes from this monster. That was cool. And it was an aspect that the monster existing and then dying and having magic blood wasn't something that was too confusing, because I'm watching Owl House right now, and that is like the entire lore of that show basically too. That's a coincidental comparison. That's not an obvious comparison like the Harry Potter stuff I was mentioning. So that was cool, but again, I just don't understand what was going on with dark magic there. But I'm sure we don't want to have to keep hearing me say I don't understand. So let's keep moving. About this ending, there's a lot of violence in the ending, and I'm all for dark humor, but it was very jarring to me because I was trying to process the lore, and then there's like a maybe 5-minute action sequence where like Pep turns into a monster and just kills everybody in like gruesome magical ways. And I don't remember his name. The pill kid, what was his name? Saber? Was it Saber? I gotta look it up now because I want to make sure I'm right about that. Spader. Okay, I was close. He just actually dies, and his bone corpse with pink splattered Danganronpa blood, even though it's magic, it's blood, it's the ichor or whatever, but like it's just laying there. Like that's an incredible visual, but also the entire time I was like, okay, when's he gonna come back to life? And then he just doesn't, and then they use it for a joke at the very end, and like nobody really cares that he died, and then they use it as a joke at the end, and then the episode ends, which is very funny, but again, quite jarring, especially considering how goofy the rest of the episode was. I appreciate that they're trying to create like a murder mystery here, and they like are actually for whatever reason allowed to murder Bufo and Chuskus kind of, and then murder all these bad guys at the very end. It's a nice way to visualize how powerful dark magic is and how powerful this evil Pep becomes. This is a cool shot right here. On one hand, I love it. Like I think it's awesome. I love violence. Keep it up. It's a cool way to illustrate the power of dark magic, but also it's just very sudden because the rest of the episode is really funny. It's never really, aside from the joke at the very end, it's never really like talked about that like all these guys just died. Like all these wizards here are villains, so like they can die, it's fine I guess, but like it was insane. It was very quick too, and it was after you're trying to process the lore dump that they give you for like 3 minutes. So I guess it's a pacing thing maybe. There's the scene where Pep goes into Bufo's place and he sees Bufo dead, and like kind of there the tone of the episode shifts to be like a much clearer, darker direction murder mystery type of thing. But I just feel like the rest of the episode was so vibrant and funny that the transition from vibrant and funny to actual murder mystery should have been a little smoother. There should have been a few more instances of creepiness put into the introductory part of the episode with the classes and all that stuff. Also, this is in my notes. This is a kind of an unrelated thing, but I realized, I don't think I ever processed this. The fact that Pep shows up in Together Again, and that episode is obviously far in the future. So that means that Wizard City's like, right after Obsidian, right at the simultaneously as Obsidian probably. It means that Pep ends up working at the Candy Kingdom again, but I guess maybe being interested in magic in a different way, because he still uses some sort of magic to let Finn and Jake see him, but like, was that dark magic? Doesn't he not care about dark magic anymore? Or I guess maybe it just wasn't dark magic? I don't know. That also just made me realize that Adventure Time really loves having alternate versions of characters. Like, there's Finn and Fern, there's Peppermint Butler and Baby Peppermint Butler, there's Betty and Magic Betty, there's Ice King and then Ice Thing and then Simon, and there's Old Man Prismo and Prismo, there's Sweet Pea the Lich. There's a lot of this kind of thing going on, but it's cool. And again, in this episode, it serves as a very cool sort of visual moral of not always having to listen to yourself or not have to listen to the expectations that other people put on you, even if that other person is literally yourself. You know, you gotta do what you like, not what your ghost past self curse that you have to puke up likes. That was a cool aspect that Pep had to literally like vomit up the ghost. Like, that was gross, but I don't know, it was pretty cool. Again, that whole aspect, so cool. I particularly like that scene where Pep kicked a wall and then like a brick from the wall fell and like broke his leg, and then through the pain from that he puked up the ghost. Like, what a weirdly creative thing to do to force it out at that time. And also just like the sound effect that they used for his leg getting hurt there was like so crunchy and painful. Like, it was really funny. One last thing, I'm recording this in post because I forgot to mention it. There's the post-credit scene with Juice Goose. And this is significant because it's the first ever post-credits moment that Adventure Time has ever had. Which, you know, kind of makes sense because it's not like a televised cartoon can really have moments like this. And no other Distant Lands episode had it aside from this one. It's weird. Like, many of us aren't sure if this is meant to imply some sort of continuation or if this was just a joke. My impression of it, even watching it my first time, is that it's probably just meant as a joke. Like, Chusku says he's turned dark and he picks up Bufo's Finding Nemo bag. You know, it's all ominous, but it's like, can you imagine actually getting an episode where Chusku is the main villain? Like, what? Like, that would just be weird. But the Fiona and Cake thing only got greenlit like recently, so I don't think that they were aware that they were gonna continue the lore at all after this episode. So I do definitely get the impression that this little post-credits moment was just a really weird, ominous, like, fake out joke. Plus, we see Chuskusen together again, and he was like his normal self, sort of. So, you know, we can assume that Finn and Jake defeated him, and he becomes Light Goose again, and he's peppy, and then he dies either of old age or in like a steamroller accident or something. But I guess that just about wraps up my thoughts. My raw recording of this is 37 minutes so far, so that's fantastic. So overall, this is a very funny episode. All the new characters are fun. The main plot is pretty painfully generic with magic type stuff, but it's fun enough. You know, you'll still have a ton of fun. You'll laugh at the jokes. You'll like the new cast that gets introduced. But then it does very suddenly turn into a murder mystery that has a lot of lore dumping that is just a little confusing to me. A little too sudden. It needed to be foreshadowed a little more or something. But visually, you know, it's the most cinematic the show's ever been. It's amazing backgrounds, amazing animation, amazing expressive, funny animation, and really great voice acting too. I didn't quite mention that, but because these are all new people, it's all like actual kids. They do amazing jobs. I also really love Ghost Pep's voice as well, because again, they make him a villain, and him acting as a villain, like voice acting wise, ruled. So if I had to rank all the Distant Land specials, my opinion has kind of changed on this. Before I was saying I liked Wizard City less than BMO, but I think I've kind of come around to change that. I haven't watched BMO in a while though, but I think maybe the story and moral and stuff in Wizard City is stronger than BMO's. So I would say number 4 is BMO, number 3 is Wizard City, number 2 is Obsidian, and then number 1 is Together Again. But they're all so totally solid, it's really hard to compare them, especially when BMO and Wizard City are more on the goofy side, and then the other two are pretty serious. You could even say Together Again is like too serious. Obsidian probably has the strongest story. You know, it communicates like the strongest messages and has a really nice story and has musical numbers and, you know, has a lot of things that fans of the series had been dying to see for a very long time, but like quite literally just weren't allowed to see. I think just the world of Together Again is more interesting because Together Again kind of has most of the stuff, most of the fantastic stuff that Obsidian has, but also on top of that has a much more interesting, level of lore and a way more interesting setting because Obsidian's just in the Glass Kingdom basically the whole time. It's like deserted flashbacks and Glass Kingdom, and that's it. And it's not really interesting scenery, but Together Again is like insane, and that's what I love to see from the series. Together Again has the surprise aspect too, where, you know, nobody expected that to necessarily be about everybody being dead. So like that, in the way that they kind of humorously lead into that aspect of the episode, and even kind of horrifically lead into that aspect of the episode, like that all really, really stands out to me the most of all these specials. But again, very tough comparison. So if you listen to all this rambling, thank you so much. And if you have your own thoughts about this episode, or if you're really mad at my thoughts, like if you're just absolutely furious and you're gonna hit me with a Razmafu or whatever, that's like the teleport thing, right? No, actually, do some serification on me. I would like to be a biblical angel. That would be cool. Yeah, so if you have any thoughts about my thoughts, or just want to share your thoughts, because I'd be happy to read them, please leave them in the comments. Please leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to know when I post new videos. Thanks for watching, and super special thanks to my Patreon supporters. Support me on Patreon and you'll be able to submit video topics, see exclusive behind the scenes content, and help me keep this channel going. Also follow me on Twitter and TikTok for special updates.